Welcome to Headstones&Microphones Founder Stories, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation of history's most visionary founders. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these trailblazers. Now, let's meet our guest. Hey there, listeners. Today we are sitting down with an absolute titan of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. If you have ever enjoyed a refreshing, ice-cold, carbonated beverage on a hot summer day, you have this man to thank for making it a global phenomenon. Joining us from across the ages is the legendary pharmacist, marketing genius, and former mayor of Atlanta, Mr. Asa Griggs Candler. Welcome to the show, Asa.
Thank you so much for having me, Calvin. It is an absolute privilege to be here, and I am deeply grateful for the opportunity to share my story with your listeners today.
We are thrilled to have you. Let's dive right into it. When you first conceived of your business, the world was a very different place. What was the exact moment you realized society was moving in a direction only you could see? And how did you convince the early skeptics?
Well, Calvin, back in the late 1880s, I was running a successful drugstore in Atlanta. My competitor, Dr. John Pemberton, had created this fascinating, sweet, carbonated syrup as a headache remedy. When I tasted it, I didn't just see a patent medicine to cure ailments in a dark pharmacy. I had this sudden realization that people were moving away from heavy alcohol and looking for a clean, refreshing social beverage, a national temperance drink, if you will. The skeptics thought I was completely out of my mind to spend $2,300, which was a small fortune then, on a simple syrup recipe. To convince them, I didn't just sell the drink. I flooded the market with free tasting coupons. Once they tasted the future, the skepticism dissolved.
That is incredible. Talk about backing your gut. Leaving behind safety to build something entirely unproven is a massive gamble. What did your life look like the day you decided to go all in? And what was the core belief that gave you the courage to take that first step?
By 1888, my drug company was actually the largest in Atlanta. I had a comfortable life, a wonderful family, and a secure professional standing. But the day I decided to go all in on Coca-Cola, I had to systematically sell off my secure retail interests to finance this unproven elixir. My core belief was simple. A good product, backed by relentless, honest promotion, could become an indispensable part of everyday American life. I believed that refreshment was a universal human need, and that gave me the courage to step off the ledge of a safe pharmacy career into the unknown.
That takes serious backbone. In the absolute beginning, when you had no data, no capital, and no blueprint, what was the one truth you held onto that everyone else around you dismissed?
Everyone else looked at it as a localized soda fountain novelty. They told me it was a fad that would fade by next winter. The one truth I held onto was that the power of a brand lies in its omnipresence. I knew that if I could make the name and the taste familiar to every man, woman, and child, it would become an institution. They dismissed the idea of mass marketing, but I knew that visibility would create its own demand.
And it certainly did. Now, long before your company became a household name, you hit a wall where everything nearly collapsed. Take us back to that first major failure. What went wrong, and how did you find the willpower to restart?
Oh, the early days were a legal and logistical nightmare, Calvin. Right after I bought a stake in the formula, I found myself locked in a bitter struggle over the rights to the name itself. Dr. Pemberton's son, Charlie, held onto the exclusive rights to the Coca-Cola name, and there were multiple versions of the drink being sold by different parties. It was a complete mess. I was forced to try selling my batch under the names Yum Yum and Coke, and let me tell you, they failed miserably. The public completely rejected them. I felt like I had thrown my hard-earned money down the drain. But I knew the formula was magic, so I swallowed my pride, waited, and the moment a legal window opened after Dr. Pemberton's passing, I moved swiftly to buy out the remaining shares and consolidate the rights for $2,300 total. I restarted with a clean slate and a singular focus.
Wow, Yum Yum just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? Innovation often looks like madness to contemporaries. Was there a specific product, philosophy, or strategy you were utterly convinced would work, but the public initially rejected or ridiculed? How did you respond?
My entire marketing philosophy was viewed as pure madness by old-school businessmen. I started manufacturing clocks, calendars, urns, and apothecary scales, all emblazoned with our logo, and I gave them away to pharmacists for free. People laughed and said I was running a charity, not a business, and that I was wasting all my profits on trinkets. I responded by doubling down. I knew that every time a customer looked up to check the time, or a pharmacist weighed out medicine, they would see our name. The ridicule stopped when the syrup orders started pouring in from every corner of the country.
It was subliminal marketing before that was even a term. Behind the legendary name was a human being facing immense pressure, whether from financial panics, internal betrayal, or personal doubt. How did you shoulder that burden without letting the vision splinter?
My faith was my anchor, Calvin. I was raised with a very strict work ethic and deep religious convictions as a Methodist. When the financial panics of the 1890s hit, or when we faced the immense pressure of removing the trace amounts of cocaine from the coca leaves to ensure our drink was entirely safe and wholesome, ahead of the government regulations, the weight was heavy. I managed it by focusing on philanthropy and community. I poured myself into helping Atlanta, endowing hospitals, and supporting Emory University. Keeping my eyes on how wealth could serve others kept my personal doubts from crushing the business.
That is a beautiful way to keep perspective. Let's talk about the people who helped you get there. Who were the very first people, beyond your immediate family, to buy into what you were doing? How did you convince early workers or customers to trust an entirely unproven concept?
The very first true believers were the local Atlanta pharmacists and soda fountain operators. To get them to trust an unproven concept, I had to reduce their risk entirely. I told them, I will give you the syrup, and I will give your customers coupons for a free glass. I will pay you for every coupon you redeem. Once the pharmacists saw the crowds wrapping around the block to get their free taste, and then returning with copper coins to buy more, they became my fiercest advocates.
Can you take us to the exact moment where you felt the momentum shift? What was the specific milestone, contract, or breakthrough where you realized we aren't just going to survive, we are going to change everything?
It was in 1895, just 3 years after incorporating the Coca-Cola Company. I proudly wrote in my annual report to our shareholders that our drink was now being consumed in every single state and territory in the United States. We had established syrup plants in Chicago, Dallas, and Los Angeles. That was the milestone. Seeing a beverage that started in a humble brass kettle in Atlanta being poured simultaneously on the Pacific Coast and in New York City, that was the moment I knew we had changed the cultural fabric of the nation.
You didn't just build a company, you built a distinct culture and philosophy that outlasted you. In the early days, when it was just a handful of people in a room, how did you instill that standard of excellence or service?
I insisted on absolute consistency and purity. In the early days, if a batch of syrup wasn't exactly to the standard, it was discarded. I drilled it into our small team that we weren't just selling a sugary drink, we were selling an exact, dependable experience. I also modeled a culture of hard work. I was in the office early, overseeing the ledgers, and treating our brand name as a sacred trust.
History books often flatten a person's life into a neat, polished narrative. What is the biggest misconception people have about your journey, your character, or how your company was actually built?
Many people believe I was the one who invented the drink, completely overlooking Dr. Pemberton's brilliant chemistry. Others think the bottling empire was my grand master plan. In truth, when Joseph Biedenharn first bottled the drink in Mississippi and sent me a case, I was completely unenthusiastic about it. I actually sold the nationwide bottling rights for just $1 single because I believed the future of the company lay strictly in the fountain syrup. It turns out that bottling was the true catalyst for our global reach, even if I didn't see the full value of it at the time.
That is a wild piece of history. Building an empire always requires a steep personal cost. Looking back at the entirety of your life, what was the hardest sacrifice you had to make for the sake of your vision? And was it ultimately worth it?
The hardest sacrifice was the sheer toll it took on my time and my focus. I poured so much of my mind and soul into the relentless expansion of the business that it consumed decades of my life, often at the expense of a quiet, peaceful existence. In my later years, after I stepped away to serve as mayor and gave the stock to my children, there was a lot of internal family friction when they chose to sell the company to an outside syndicate. It was heartbreaking to see the family legacy shift out of our hands. But looking at the hospitals we built, the university we established, and the joy the beverage brought to millions during my lifetime, yes, the sacrifice was worth it.
If you could send a single sentence back through time to yourself on the very first day you started this venture, knowing every trial, triumph, and heartbreak that awaited you, what would you say?
I would tell myself, trust in your faith, hold fast to your standards of absolute purity, and remember that the goodwill of the people is the most valuable asset you will ever own.
That is powerful advice for any entrepreneur out there. Asa, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with our listeners before we sign off?
I just want to encourage everyone listening to pursue their visions with integrity and a spirit of service to their communities. Thank you so much, Calvin, for this wonderfully lively conversation and for allowing me to revisit the journey. It has been an honor.
The honor was completely ours. Thank you, Asa. What a phenomenal conversation with Asa Griggs Candler. We got to hear firsthand about the chaotic scramble for the Coca-Cola name, the genius behind giving away free coupons, and the reminder that even the greatest business minds don't predict every turn their company will take. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast, Founder Stories. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.